What is good? Now by this, I don't mean what are some examples of good things, or even what are some synonyms for the word. I mean how do we define and qualify what good, in its purest form, really is? This is definitely a daunting question. In fact, the father of Western philosophy, Socrates, could only somewhat answer it, and relied heavily on simile to do so. In this video, we're going to be going through Socrates' similes to try and answer this formidable inquiry, or at least give it our best shot. We start with the simile of the sun. Socrates prefaces this discussion with a quick note about the sense of sight's uniqueness. The sense of sight is unlike other senses because it needs an additional ingredient to work, light. To taste something, you simply put it on your tongue. To feel, a small tap will guarantee stimulus. But with sight, you may have working eyes and be looking at a vibrantly colored object, but with no light, you can't see it in the slightest. Now onto our simile. The sun is, for the most part, the source of light in our world, even more so during Socrates' time. So it is the sun which allows sight to occur, while being a separate entity from sight and also being seen by sight. When it is dark and objects are only seen by moonlight, they are fuzzy and hard to make out. But when the sun shines on these same objects, they become readily clear and distinguishable. All of this can be related to the good and the intelligible realm in which it resides. The intelligible realm is basically one of understanding and includes ideas like beauty rather than, say, beautiful things. The good in this case being the sun, and truth its light. When the mind is focused on things illuminated by truth or reality, it understands and knows them. As the light of the sun illuminates objects for the eye to see, the truth of the good allows the mind to know. Since without truth or reality, we could not know the actual form of something. We would only know what it appears to be. Desmond Lee's translation of The Republic, the book in which Socrates says all this, offers a helpful table to sort all of this out. In the visible world, the sun is the source of light, which gives visibility to concrete objects and the power of seeing to the eye. It's the faculty of sight. In the intelligible world, the good is the source of truth, which gives intelligibility to abstract objects and the power of knowing to the mind. It's the faculty of knowledge. The physical world is a changing and decaying one. So real truth lies only in the abstract intelligible world, as that is not subject to decay. The ideas of beauty and good and truth are not dependent on our world existing. So we have a slight understanding of what the good does, and in the same manner, what it is. But all of this has been a bit out there, kind of hard to grasp. Luckily for us, Socrates gives another, more concrete explanation in his simile of the cave. Imagine a dark cave in which some men are prisoners. They have been in the cave since birth, and they are locked into place such that they may only look forward. Also in this cave is a fire and a raised path in between the fire and the prisoners. All sorts of stone and wood things with shapes of men and animals travel over this path. Yet, all the prisoners see is the shadow of these objects that is cast by the fire onto the wall of the cave. It'd be right to assume that the prisoners would think the shadows to be reality, and the sounds coming from the objects to be coming from the shadows. But if one of the prisoners is freed, he'll be able to look at the fire and the real objects, albeit he'll see them in quite a dazzled and fuzzy state. It'd be hard for the prisoner to wrap his head around what he's seeing, especially if he's told that these are real and that what he's seen his whole life are merely illusions. Chances are he wouldn't believe these new circumstances to be true or real, as his old life would make so much more sense to him. If we take the prisoner out of the cave, the shock would be even greater. The light would be so blinding to someone who spent their entire life in a cave that the prisoner wouldn't be able to see a single thing at first. He would need to grow accustomed to the light. He would first make out the shadows, then the reflections of the real forms of the stone and wood objects, being the images of actual men and actual animals. And later he would be able to see the real objects themselves. After this, he'd be able to make out the night sky and look into the light of the moon and the stars. And lastly, he would be able to look at and be able to see the sun in itself, though probably not for very long without receiving some painful retinal damage. The freed prisoner would come to know that the sun is the source of life, promoting growth and being the key to sight for the world. After seeing all this, the freed prisoner would look back at his old life with pity and feel sorry for those still in it. He would see that their values, which are held in the shadows of reality, are next to meaningless. And if the freed man went back to the cave, he wouldn't be able to distinguish hardly anything, as his eyes were adjusted to the light, not the dark. His old friends would ridicule his inability to see, thinking that a trip outside the cave is worthless and a waste of time. Comparing this to the simile of the sun can make both more clear. The sun serves in both as the good, and comparing them will give a better understanding of what this good is. The prisoner who is freed is the ideal philosopher. The other prisoners are non-philosophers, and each stage, from start to finish, is one of higher understanding. The philosopher is allowed to break free from the state of illusions that is the shadows in the cave, and then moves past the objects in the cave, which equate to perception of the physical forms of the world. Once into the upper realm, the philosopher is now in the plane of the intelligible, the actual men and animals there being intelligibility or understanding of the real forms of the world, such as of true beauty. The sun, being the last to be seen, is the form of good, which is hardest of all to understand and that which allows for knowledge of the true nature of things. We're still left with a pretty abstract answer, but that kind of makes sense. Everything concerning the good in these similes is in the world of the abstract too. But to be a bit more to the point, the good is the source of truth and intelligence, producing whatever is right and valuable. It is above truth and understanding, and is responsible for them. And anyone who's going to act rationally, either in public or private life, must have sight of it.